very much. It's great to be here with some freedom fighters. You are fighting for freedom for your loved ones and your friends halfway around the world, just as they are fighting for freedom on this day.
And it boils down to a simple desire that is in the hearts and souls of every person that has ever lived or ever will live: the right to be free, the right to be left alone. And the MEK, that's what the MEK wants. Leave us alone. Don't punish us. Don't hurt us. Don't torture us. Don't kill our family. Leave us alone. But for some reason, that little fella from the desert, Ahmadinejad, and his cohort, Mr. Maliki, don't get that message. And they don't get that message for a lot of reasons. But one reason is they just don't like the MEK. And so they do these bad things. And, you know, I have been in this struggle with y'all since several of you came and met with me down in the great state of Texas in a small little room and telling me this story of persecution of a people who just want to be left alone. So Iraq comes up with this idea: well, you're in this one place, Camp Ashraf, but you can't stay there before you leave. You got to go to Camp Liberty, and then we'll let you leave. Okay. So MEK, who is, by the way, let us be very clear, is not armed, has no weapons, has no self-protection. They said, okay, we'll do what's necessary to leave Iraq. But we would like to be safe before we leave. So, the folks, the freedom fighters, have agreed to leave Camp Ashraf to Camp Liberty. The folks in Iran, the little fellow from the desert, when I mentioned this last year, when this came up last year, this new plan to move before you can move, I mentioned that I thought this was just another way for the little fellow from the desert to make sure that life was terrible for the MEK, to torture them, to belittle them, intimidate them, because he couldn't get them back into Iran. Unfortunately, my prophecy has come true. And these bad things are continuing to happen to these people, to these good people that want nothing more than to be left alone and be free, and a free people. So, what have we gotten? Residents have been moved to Camp Liberty. But the bottom line is, 0 have been moved out of Iraq. You can do all this bureaucratic stuff, but the bottom line is, they're still in Iraq. Now, why is that? Well, I think there are numerous reasons. And we'll come back to the terrible things that are happening in Camp Liberty that you have displayed over here on these posters in a minute. We have the moral and legal obligation to take and protect those folks in Camp Ashraf or Camp Liberty or wherever they're displaced in Iraq. We have that legal and moral obligation. So, what are we doing? Well, whatever we're doing sure isn't keeping those folks safe in Camp Liberty. But we're supposed to diplomatically encourage the Iraqis to treat those folks in Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf at least humanely. But that's not working. The conditions are awful. I mean, I have been to Guantanamo Bay Prison. I used to be a judge in Texas. I've been to prisons all over the world. Let me tell you, the conditions in Camp Liberty that we allow to exist are worse than any prison I have ever seen. It is, as Rudy Giuliani has said, nothing more than a modern-day concentration camp where the lives of people are controlled and not treated fairly. Can't get water. Can't sell even their property before they leave the country, so somebody's going to steal it. You can't take care of your folks that are disabled. Basic human necessities are ignored. Now, why is that? Well, in my opinion, it's because of the Maliki government. So the Maliki government has decided to put somebody in charge of Camp Liberty. I haven't met this guy, but his name is Colonel Kazem. You may have heard him. I'm going to call him Colonel Fox because he's the fox guarding the hen house. And so Colonel Fox's background is interesting because he was the colonel that ordered the massacre of 36 Camp Ashraf residents last April. Now, isn't that lovely? Putting the fox, Colonel Fox, in charge of the innocents in Camp Ashraf. And he is the one that is preventing basic necessities from coming in to Camp Ashraf, and Camp Liberty, I should say. Why would they put Colonel Fox in charge? Makes no sense to me unless they want to continue, the government wants to continue its persecution. Now, I can only speak from my personal experience. I know we're trying to deal with the Maliki government in a diplomatic way, but let me tell you what happened to me last year when I was with several other members of Congress and we went to see Mr. Maliki in Iraq. And while we were there visiting with him, we made this request. We would like to go see Camp Ashraf and see for ourselves the conditions. Because, you know, the world has heard everything, that it's from a concentration camp to a paradise. You know, I mean, the world has been told that by different folks. Let us go see, we'll make our own judgment. And Mr. Maliki was incensed. He was infuriated that we would even ask to go see Camp Ashraf. And his denial was emphatic. You will not go to Camp Ashraf. And one of the primary reasons he denied American members of Congress to Camp Ashraf was because the State Department continues to list the MEK in Camp Ashraf as a foreign terrorist organization. That's what he threw in our face. Your own government labels them as an FTO. You cannot go. So that's the consequences of the State Department dragging its feet in failure to delist the MEK. Because other countries, and Maliki is one of them, that uses our designation as an excuse to torture people. And just to show you how emphatic he was, after we left that little delightful meeting and flew somewhere else in Iraq, we learned from the State Department, he dealt with the State Department, that we had been ordered to leave Iraq. And anyway, the State Department has been dragging its feet. The courts have said the State Department is dragging its feet. It's time for a day of reckoning. It's time for a day of justice. It's a time of justice for the people in Camp Liberty. They want to leave. Let them go. And the reason there is zero people that have been left or left Camp Liberty is because other countries won't take them, because the United States still designates those people as a foreign terrorist organization. It's real simple. Delist the MEK, let those people go, because they need to be free. The greatest nation in the world is the United States. We've had our own struggles with human rights, But we still believe in human rights. And we preach that gospel to the world. And it's time that we practice what we preach and have human rights for all people in Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty, because justice is what we do. And justice should occur now, not later. And that's just the way it is. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.